Mark Schaffer, if we can start with you, I mean, obviously you've got a commercial interest in this, but I've found in talking to people who run e-scooter businesses before, yes, it's a commercial opportunity, but it's also something they believe passionately in as well. Tell us why you do.
I guess there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I believe that the way that we get around in this country needs a bit of an using 2 tons of steel to travel a mile or two down the road in an urban environment, for me, in my opinion, puts a lot of people's lives at risk in terms of pollution and in terms of physics of just, carrying that much weight around on city streets. For me, e-scooters and e-bikes and micromobility, so lightweight electric vehicles, provide us with a solution for this. It's rather than it's a lot of carrot and not much stick in getting people to change their lifestyle, which would be good for everybody.
Mike Rawson, Mark Schaffer's there laying out the position for e-scooters. We've heard it many, many times, and there'll be many people who are sympathetic to that position. I'm one of them. I think a lot of people get the logic of it. What they don't get is this reluctance on the part of policymakers, and I dare say maybe even some of your former colleagues within the police service who seem confused about whether they ought to be applying the law, and in not applying it, then people overall take the law less seriously, don't they?
Yes, I do take Mark's point about the personal transport. The problem comes when they don't really mix with vehicular traffic. And I'm afraid my observations have been in a lot of irresponsible drivers. And I think that's disappointing. But interestingly enough, I know that many people say the police are not interested, but I was looking at the figures and just under 4,000 were seized last year in London, and I imagine most of them were destroyed.
Mark Schaffer, the way I just laid it out in my introduction there, the fact that you've got 1 million scooters in private hands now, and we've got mainstream businesses marketing them, but not really, I think, pointing out to people the way the law applies to them. We've got a situation effectively where high street businesses are advocating law breaking. I mean, as I say, that's got nothing to do whether you believe in e-scooters or not. It's a problem with the way the law is framed, interpreted by businesses, and then not actioned by our law enforcement officials.
Well, look, Mike makes a good point. Mike's Met Police, I believe in traffic, and he's absolutely right that there's been a national crackdown over the last 6 months into using e-scooters. Most people that you'll meet are perfectly aware that riding privately owned e-scooters isn't necessarily kosher. And in my experience, I mean, PET being one of these retailers, we make it very, very clear to everybody that walks in the door. There are disclaimers all over the websites. We make it clear to people that, look, this is your own risk.
You know what's going on, but you've said it. You've just said it. They know it's probably not kosher. I mean, that's not a sustainable position for a law-abiding country.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I believe that both Mike and myself are in agreement. We need regulation. We need the government to act. We've had plenty of time with these trials running that have proved again and again that e-scooters are as safe as bicycles. The performance envelope is roughly the same, the weight is the same, and providing they're ridden with care, with crash helmets and possibly an ID scheme, we can make this perfectly safe. I mean, nothing is 100% safe. I mean, walking isn't 100% safe, but within the all probability, it's going to be as safe as cycling.
Yeah, I mean, there were 133 serious injuries last year from the use of e-scooters. The number of fatalities rose by a factor of 3 as well. There will be people who say, well, look, there are nearly 2,000 fatalities on our roads in cars and motorbikes. It's just, if millions of people want to get around, that's a price we have to pay. As I say, that's a separate issue from the fact that the law has been made to look foolish here. And I think that's a really slippery slope for society to go down. if, as Mark says, people know it's not really kosher, businesses shrug their shoulders, the police turn a blind eye. That's not a great state of affairs. Where does that take us?
It's a difficult one because it's a pretty new concept, isn't it? And I think it's overtaken the ability of the legislators to deal with it. If I could just make 2 points. Personally, I would like to see the maximum speed of these scooters in built-up areas 5 miles an hour. That's about, because 15 miles an hour, which is legal, they're covering about 7 metres every second, and that's not good on footways, and that's why they're banned from footways. But getting back to the retailer's responsibility, I would like to see the law made so that retailers must supply the purchaser with a list of legal do's and don'ts, where they can and cannot be used. And I would like the purchaser to sign a declaration to say they've received that and that they commit to passing that information on to the person to whom they're going to give the scooter, because scooters are obviously given as presents to youngsters. So let's try and tighten up the responsibility, and let's try and do away with this, because there's no doubt about it. Many of them are using them on the roads. And I believe that some of them don't realise that actually that's illegal. If you want to use one, you must hire one. And isn't it strange how you can legally use one if you hire it, but you can't legally use it if you own it? And I have a struggle getting my head around that.
Well, as we struggle with that, Mike, just hold that thought. Hold your thoughts for a second. Ella Whelan's alongside me and is a person of strong opinions about most things, but this in particular. Mike makes a good point, though, doesn't he, that the legislation hasn't kept up with the pace of technological advancement here. That's one thing. He makes the point about the speed limit, 15 miles per hour for rental scooters. I'm reading about scooters doing 50 miles an hour being used by criminals who steal phones and they're gone in moments. To give one example of how we're not keeping up with the tech.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've had that before. I mean, moped theft was a big thing not so long ago.
Harder to get your hands on a moped.
Yes, but indeed, I once got my phone nicked off me with someone who was very fast on a bike. Things like that happen in built-up areas, particularly in London. And indeed, I live in Hackney, and I'm sick of trying to chase people on e-scooters off the street. I'm also sick of trying to chase cyclists off the street. So there is, the pavement has been open to a lot of bad behaviour recently. But I think it's pretty clear-cut on this that I very much support Mark's point about technological innovation. Now, I'm not quite ready to give up my van for the environment yet, because try getting a big shop home for your family on an e-scooter is probably going to be more dangerous, even if you are going 5 miles an hour. But the idea of people being able to easily get around, particularly a city, is a wonderful thing. What needs to happen is they need to be treated, actually, as both speakers made the point, in the same way that motorbikes or bikes do, in line with the highway code, and with people understanding the personal responsibility that if you get on something as precarious looking as an e-scooter without the relevant precautions going too fast and something happens to you, then that is a risk you take. I think there's a little less sort of a risk-averse approach to this, and a more serious sense of what actually can we do to allow people to enjoy these things and also stop infuriating pedestrians like me.
That's all that matters. Let's go briefly a final word to Mark Schaffer and Mike Rawson as well. Mark, to you first. I mean, wonderful you've set up a business, wonderful you've chosen a business that's almost like a Klondike, isn't it, selling e-scooters? I'm sure lots of people are trying to do it. You must worry, however, that the success is happening too quickly, and that means, as Mike Rawson made clear, that the legislators are not keeping pace with what's actually going out of your door.
Well, funnily enough, due to the police crackdown, I mean, business hasn't been particularly good. Anyone wondering whether the police are being effective or not only has to speak to a guy like me, who has been in a little bit of trouble for the last 6 months, because ultimately anyone who was sensible riding these things went back in their cars. And that's a tragedy. And, and ultimately, government policies define who's using scooters now. And, that's what we need to change. We need to get sensible people who want to use this technology, give them a regulatory framework they can do it safely.
Mike Rawson, final words from you. If you could wave your magic wand, would you just abolish e-scooters? Bad idea, full stop?
I tend to think that might be a bit harsh. People do enjoy them. But for me, the bottom line is safety. And we have to put the safety of the public as a priority. And I do think we can address the issue by reducing the speed down to 5 miles an hour in built-up areas where there are people. I don't know what Mark would think to that suggestion, but if you were hit by a scooter doing 5 miles an hour, it wouldn't do you a lot of good. But if you were hit by one doing 15 miles an hour, particularly if you were elderly, it could do you a great deal of harm.